It was a bright, sunny morning when 5 children set off for Riverbend Park. The air smelled fresh, and the sky was a clear blue. Laughter bubbled from their circle as they carried wicker baskets and bright blankets. Maria, the oldest at 12, led the group with a gentle smile. She had packed peanut butter sandwiches and lemonade for everyone. Jonathan, 10 years old, balanced the cooler on his hip, careful not to spill a drop of cold juice. Little Tina, only 7, held tight to her red polka dot hat so the wind would not take it. Carlos, aged 9, and his cousin Elaine, aged 11, followed close behind, talking about which games they would play first, as they arrived at the picnic spot. A large oak tree stood like a friendly giant guarding the grass. Sunlight dappled through its leaves, making dancing patches of light on the green ground. The children placed their blankets near the tree's broad roots and settled in. Maria carefully arranged the sandwiches in a neat row. Jonathan opened. The cooler and the sound of ice clinking against metal made everyone's mouths water. Elaine munched on a crunchy carrot stick while Tina clapped her hands, excited by the bright day. Carlos pointed toward the creek that curved around the park, its water sparkling in the sun. After a quick snack, the children could not wait to play. Maria suggested a game of hide-and-seek. She closed her eyes and counted slowly while the others scattered. Jonathan dashed toward the playground, its swings swaying gently in the breeze. Elaine climbed onto the slide and hid behind its tall ladder. Carlos tiptoed into a tangle of wildflowers near the creek's edge. Tina, small and quick, squeezed behind a picnic table to avoid being found. The park echoed with the joy of childhood shouts, of surprise, giggles, and the soft rush of the creek's flowing water. A few minutes later, Maria opened her eyes and looked around. She spotted Tina's shoes peeking out from behind the table. "Found you, Tina," she called, smiling. One by one, she located Carlos hiding among flowers and Elaine behind the slide. Jonathan playfully complained about being easy to find. The children laughed as they regrouped under the oak tree. Moments like this felt endless. The park was their secret world, was a place where time seemed to slow down. Dogs on leashes trotted past with their owners, and families strolled by enjoying the warm air. A father taught his young daughter how to skip stones on the creek's surface. A couple fed ducks by the water's edge, tossing bits of bread into the gentle current. Butterflies floated among the flowers, their wings flashing bright colors. After the game, Maria suggested they rest and cool off. She poured lemonade into small paper cups, handing one to each friend. The cold drink was sweet and tart, making everyone sigh with delight. Jonathan stretched out on the blanket and looked up at the sky, searching for shapes in the clouds. "That one looks like a dragon," he said, pointing.
Ah!
Tina squinted and nodded, imagining a friendly dragon flying overhead. Elaine lay on her back, humming a tune softly, while Carlos allowed a tiny ant to crawl onto his finger. Carefully placing it back on the ground, the picnic basket still held more food. Maria unpacked slices of juicy watermelon. The red fruit glistened in the sun, and the children bit into it, juice running down their chins. They made silly faces as they ate, wiping their mouths with napkins. The sound of their laughter mixed with birdsong and the rustling leaves above. Nearby, 2 mothers, Mrs. Thompson and Mrs. Patel, smiled as they watched from a short distance. They had brought extra snacks and ice for the cooler. Mrs. Thompson carried another jug of lemonade and set it down beside the blanket. Mrs. Patel brought a tray of cheese and crackers. The parents chatted quietly, sharing stories about their children's school adventures and weekend plans. They felt a gentle breeze brush against their cheeks, and the bright day gave them a sense of calm happiness. As the clock moved closer to noon, the sun rose higher and the air grew warmer. Mrs. Thompson offered to fetch more ice from the car. She asked Mrs. Patel to come along. The 2 mothers left together, walking down the short path that led to the parking lot. They carried the empty ice bucket and an extra bag of chips. The children waved goodbye, already turning toward the creek. Once more, with the mothers out of sight, the children decided to explore. Carlos led the way, stepping carefully on smooth stones in the shallow water. The creek's cool flow tickled their toes, and they let out small shrieks of delight. Jonathan found a long stick and pretended it was a magic wand, tapping stones and making pretend spells. Elaine and Tina chased each other around the rock pools, dipping their fingers into tiny whirlpools. Maria followed behind, calling out safety reminders, but enjoying herself too. She made sure everyone stayed within a few steps of one another. For a while, the park seemed perfect. There was no worry in their hearts. Each child felt safe, trusting the promise of a short break and an afternoon full of play. The gentle hum of insects rose from the grass, and birds flitted between branches above. Even a small gray squirrel paused to watch, its bright eyes curious about the visitors to its home. Then a new sound rose above the creak's melody of vehicle engine. The children looked up. From between the trees, a white van slowly crept along the park road. It did not have any logos or writing on its side. This was strange because most vans in their town always showed company names or bright graphics. The van's windows were tinted dark, so no one inside could be seen clearly. The engine idled softly, and the tires made a faint whisper on the pavement. Carlos pointed at the van.
Ow!
"Look, guys," he said, his voice curious. Jonathan wiped his hands on his shorts and peered at the vehicle. Elaine and Tina stopped their game, and even Maria felt a small flutter of worry in her chest. The van parked near the empty picnic tables, just a short distance from the oak tree where their own blankets lay. The children stayed still, watching. No one in the van got out or rolled down a window. It sat quietly, as if waiting. The air around them felt different, an odd hush replaced the laughter. Even the creak sounded softer. The children glanced at one another, sharing puzzled looks. Jonathan whispered, "I wonder who that is." Carlos took a step forward. "Maybe they just lost their way," he said, trying to sound brave. Maria shook her head. She felt uneasy. "We should stay together," she said, her voice firm but calm. The others nodded. They turned away from the van and moved back toward the safety of the oak tree's shade. Their feet pressed into the soft grass, and for a moment they thought their mothers might return any second. But time stretched on. 20 minutes passed and the van remained still. Mothers were not back yet. Children began to feel nervous. The sun was now high overhead, making patches of light dance on the blankets. The sandwiches and snacks waited, untouched, since the first bites. The children looked around once more, hoping to see Mrs. Thompson or Mrs. Patel heading down the path. Instead, only the van faced them in silence. Maria squared her shoulders. She knew they had to do something. She held out her hand and said, "Let's go back to where we first started and wait. We should not stay by that van." Jonathan, Tina, Carlos, and Elaine followed her lead. They walked in a tight group, imagining their parents calling for them. As they moved, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. The children did not notice the sun's warmth anymore. Their hearts beat faster, and their heads filled with questions. Who drove that van? Why were they parked so close to their picnic spot? And where were their mothers? They reached the blankets and gathered around the cooler. Maria opened it, looking for the ice jug. It was gone. Everything looked normal otherwise, but the empty spot felt wrong. Jonathan hugged the cooler's handle, looking at his friends. Tina's eyes were wide. Lane's face was pale. Carlos scanned the trees for any sign of movement. Not knowing what to do next, the children stood close together and called out softly, "Mom, Mrs. Patel?" Their voices drifted into the trees, but no answer came back. The van's engine turned over, but it stayed put. A cool knot of fear sat in each child's stomach. In that moment, a long afternoon of fun turned into a puzzle no one expected. The perfect picnic afternoon was slipping away, and the children felt in their bones that something was not right. They huddled together, waiting for their mothers. But the park was too quiet now, and the silent van watched them like a secret waiting to unfold. The moment the children called for help, their voices seemed to disappear into the wide park. Maria held Tina's hand tightly, and Carlos kept close to Elaine. Their eyes darted between the silent van and the empty path leading to the parking lot. The sun felt hotter now, and each child's heart beat faster. They whispered to one another, trying to stay calm. Maria took a deep breath. "We have to look for Mom and Mrs. Patel," she said softly. She led the group back toward the main trail. Their little feet pounded on the dirt path as they hurried past empty picnic tables and rustling bushes. The warm breeze carried birdsong, but the children barely heard it. Their minds raced with worry. At the park entrance, Maria paused and scanned the area. A few cars were parked along the road, but none belonged to their families. A man walked his dog near the sign that marked the park rules. Maria waved, hoping he might know where their mothers were. "Sir," she called, voice shaking, "have you seen two women carrying an ice bucket?" The man stopped and tilted his head, surprised. He shook his head. "I haven't," he said kindly. "But I can check around with you." Grateful, the children led him back down the path. They hoped someone else might have noticed Mrs. Thompson and Mrs. Patel hurrying back. Along the way, Jonathan and Carlos looked under benches and around tree trunks. Elaine and Tina clutched each other's hands, their eyes wide. The older man, Mr. Dalton, listened to their story as they walked. When they reached the picnic area, he helped them search behind the oak's thick trunk and near the creek stones. But there was no sign of the two mothers. Maria felt a lump in her throat. She knelt to pick up a small scrap of paper on the ground. It was a blue napkin, torn and crumpled. Her heart sank. "This was ours," she said, voice low. She held it out so the others could see. Carlos bent down and pointed to a shoe print in the soft earth. The print was larger than his shoe. It led away from the picnic spot toward the thick woods on one side of the park. "We should follow it," Carlos said, voice small. Maria nodded. The group moved in a single line, following the footprints into the shade of tall pines. The forest smelled of damp earth and pine needles. Sunlight flickered through the branches above, making patches of light on the ground. The children's shoes made crunching sounds as they walked over sticks and leaves. Jonathan frowned at the marks on the trees. "Someone came this way," he said, "but it's not fresh." He pointed to a fallen branch that had been moved. The footprints were older, but the napkin felt new. Elaine's eyes filled with tears. "What if something bad happened?" she whispered. Tina hugged her tightly. Maria wiped Elaine's cheek and said, "We will find them. We have to." The forest grew thicker and quieter. Even the birdsong faded. Maria's stomach felt tied in knots. She pushed aside hanging branches, trying to clear a path. Carlos stayed behind her, making sure no one tripped. Elaine and Tina walked side by side. Jonathan held an empty sandwich bag, ready to collect anything important they might find. After a few minutes, the footprints turned and led back toward the road. The napkin scrap lay in the grass. Jonathan picked it up with care. "They went this way," he said. The children hurried out of the trees and onto a small service road that ran along the park's edge. A parked pickup truck sat alone near a locked gate. The children slowed down, afraid to miss something. Maria held up the napkin. "This is from our picnic," she said. They must have left it here when they felt worried. She wrapped the tiny piece in her hand. The scrap of paper was a sign that someone had come looking for them, more that someone had found their things. The thought made her heart pound. Just then, a police officer's car pulled in. Two uniformed deputies stepped out. Their badges shone in the sun, and they looked serious. Maria ran toward them, waving her arms. "Please help us," she cried. "Our mothers are missing." The deputies hurried over. One of them, Deputy Morales, knelt down beside Maria. He asked the children to explain what happened. They told him about the picnic, the silent van, and the footprints. Deputy Morales listened carefully. He glanced at the white van parked near the picnic tables. "We will check that van," he said firmly, "and we will find your mothers." He called into his walkie-talkie, asking for backup. Deputy James arrived soon in another patrol car. He joined Morales at the picnic spot. Together, they surrounded the van. Its driver's door was locked, and the tinted windows hid the inside. Meanwhile, Deputy Morales asked the children to stay together and wait by the picnic area. He promised to bring their mothers back. But Maria and her friends felt uneasy staying alone, so the deputies invited them into the patrol cars. The children climbed in, taking deep breaths. Mrs. Thompson and Mrs. Patel were not inside either car. The deputies drove slowly down the service road, searching the edges of the trees. Inside the police car, Elaine felt brave. She looked out the window at the fields beyond the park. "I hope they are okay," she said. Jonathan squeezed her hand and nodded. Carlos stared at the back of the police car that held the napkin. Maria sat quietly, listening to the deputies discuss plans on the radio. They spoke of calling the search and rescue team and sending divers into the creek. Not far from the picnic spot, a squad car already blocked the entrance to the woods. Team members in bright vests prepared to search in small groups. One group had dogs on leashes. Mr. Dalton met them there. He offered to help lead the search because he knew the forest trails well. The children watched from the car windows as the dogs and rescuers spread out into the trees. Back at the picnic blankets, deputies examined every detail. They dusted the area for fingerprints. They photographed the ground and measured footprints. They looked for tire tracks near the van. Deputy James radioed in that the van's plate was not on file. It was likely stolen or unregistered. The deputies shined their flashlights inside the van but found nothing except shadows. While officers worked, a woman from park headquarters arrived. She carried a clipboard and looked concerned. She spoke. 2 deputies, explaining that the park's security camera had caught a vehicle entering 30 minutes before. The woman pointed to a small black and white photo from the camera's screen. Now the image showed the van's shape, but the license plate was too blurry to read. Deputies compared the camera time to the children's story. They realized that the van had been there before the mothers left. That meant the van might have been waiting, watching. The children huddled in the patrol car, feeling their hope waver. Maria forced herself to think clearly. She whispered to her friends, "We helped find the napkin. We can help more. We will get them back." Later, Deputy Morales returned to speak with them. He gave each child a bottle of water and let them hold a small flashlight. He said, "You've been very brave. We'll use every tool we have to bring your mothers home," he promised. To stay in touch and ask the children to rest a little before the search went on all night. Outside, the sun began to set. The bright day turned orange and pink. The forest shadows grew long. Search teams called to each other. The dogs sniffed at tree trunks and bushes. Divers set up near the creek, readying their equipment. The children sat on a standby bench under a lamppost. Maria wrapped her arms around Elaine and Tina. Carlos leaned his head on Jonathan's shoulder. Despite the fear, they remembered the picnic's happy start. They thought of the sandwiches and the games. Maria closed her eyes and imagined her mother's smile. She pictured Mrs. Patel's gentle voice. She believed they would be all right because so many people cared. Deputy James came over and knelt beside them. He showed Maria a small sketch of the van from the security camera footage. "See this?" he said. "We'll figure out whose it is." The children nodded, their eyes tired but determined. The park felt different, now quiet and serious. Yet in that calm, a sense of purpose grew. They knew they had helped. They had found a clue. They felt less alone with deputies around them. Night fell, and park lights came on. The search would go on through the dark. The children held hands and looked up at the stars peeking through the tree branches. They thought of the day's laughter, the games, and the picnic under the oak tree. They knew this picnic would become a mystery that people would remember. In that moment, the children made a promise to each other. They would stay brave and help the deputies. They would remember every detail, every sound and sight. Together, they would bring their mothers home. And as the park's lights glowed softly, the search began in full, moving from the quiet picnic spot to the deep woods beyond, guided by footprints, hushed whispers, and a hope that would not fade. Years passed, and the river's gentle sound at Riverbend Park slowly blended with new memories. The picnic blankets lay folded away, and the chalky footprints faded from the dirt paths. Yet for the 5 children and their families, the echoes of that day stayed alive. Detectives continued to chase every lead they could find. In those early weeks after the disappearance, officers worked long hours under bright lights in the sheriff's office. They sorted through piles of witness statements, photos, and maps. Every piece of paper felt like it might hold the clue that would bring the mothers home. Detective Harris pored over the notebook filled with pages of small handwriting. He had marked dozens of tips in different colors. One tip said a white van was seen on a back road just outside town. Another note came from a driver who thought he recognized one of the children's jackets. Harris drove the dusty county roads, showing photos to farmers and shopkeepers. He knocked on worn wooden doors, introducing himself and gently asking if anyone remembered seeing 5 smiling kids on that spring afternoon. Many shook their heads and closed their doors. Others offered only polite smiles before turning away. At the sheriff's office, the evidence room held the few items pulled from the park that day: a torn napkin, a child's red hat, and a single drop of dried blood on a sandwich wrapper. A young forensic technician named Elaine ran tests on every scrap. She tried to lift fingerprints from the hat's brim and looked for fibers under a microscope. In 1989, DNA testing was new and expensive. Elaine sent samples to state labs and waited weeks for results. When the reports came back, they only said there was human blood on the wrapper. Nothing more. No match, no answers. The media joined the hunt in those first few months. Local newspapers printed photos of the mothers at the park, their faces tense with worry. Radio stations replayed the descriptions of the missing children. Television crews interviewed neighbors who spoke in low voices about their concern and fear. The story touched hearts across the state. People held candlelight vigils and left flyers on car windshields in towns 50 miles away. Still, as time passed, fewer new faces joined the search. Tips slowed to a trickle. The world began to look forward to other news. Inside the family's homes, life felt paused. Maria, now in middle school, would sometimes stop in the middle of class and think of the oak tree. She wondered if one day she might find a note hidden there. Jonathan refused to throw away his red and white cooler. He kept it under his bed, hoping the day would come when he could fill it again with snacks for his mother. Elaine wrote stories in her journal, imagining how she and Tina would welcome their mothers back, arms wide and smiles bright. Carlos became quiet most evenings, staring at the small piece of napkin in a glass jar on his dresser. He touched it gently, as if speaking to it made it remember. Detective Harris never gave up. Even when most of the case files went into long-term storage, he kept one folder on his desk at home. He pinned photos of the picnic spot and hand-drew maps of the park trails. His wife would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night to find him sitting in the darkness, studying the pictures with a cup of cold coffee. She knew he believed in miracles. He believed that one day, something he had missed would come back to life. By the early 1990s, technology began to advance. Computers sat on desks in police stations, humming softly. Officers learned how to store information digitally. But the old paper files held the story of those 5 missing mothers and 5 children who had become young adults. Detective Harris started typing a new report on a desktop computer. He entered names, dates, and times. He scanned old photos so they could appear on a bright screen. He thought this might help him see links he had not noticed before. One day, a letter arrived from a retired mail carrier. He remembered the day of the picnic because he drove past the park and waved at the children as he delivered the morning mail. The carrier's handwriting was shaky, but his memory was strong. He said he noticed a stranger in a dark coat who watched the picnic from behind a tree. He could not say what the person looked like, but he thought the figure stood too, still, almost as if waiting for something. Detective Harris read the letter twice, felt a chill of hope, tried to find the mail carrier, but the man had moved to another state. The trail went cold again. In 1995, the sheriff's department officially closed the active investigation. They labeled the case as cold. That meant no more regular searches, no more weekly meetings in the big conference room with whiteboards full of names. The files went back into the dusty vault. Detective Harris retired soon after, carried one last file folder with him on his final day. His captain told him, "You've done all you can." Harris nodded but did not speak. He left the folder on his living room table, ready for the day when new questions would come. The children grew up carrying a mix of grief and resilience. Maria became a teacher. She helped young students learn to read, always thinking how words can guide us home. Jonathan studied water safety, teaching swimming lessons near lakes and rivers. He felt comfort working by water, even though the creek at Riverbend still made him pause, Elaine volunteered at a children's hospital. She wanted to bring smiles to kids who were scared or lonely. Tina found joy in painting scenes of parks with big oak trees. She captured the sunlight dancing on green grass, like she remembered from her last happy moment at the picnic. Each family marked anniversaries quietly. On the picnic's lost day each year, they placed bouquets of simple flowers at the park entrance. They whispered the 5 names into the wind and said a small prayer. Park workers never moved the flowers. On Memorial Day, when picnics usually returned, someone always left a new pile of pebbles shaped like a heart. No one knew who did it, but it comforted the families to see that others remembered too. In the late 1990s, a true crime podcast reached out to one of the grown children, asking if they would share their story. The child politely declined. They had moved on, but part of them never let go. They did not want strangers probing old wounds. Other journalists asked questions, but each time the answer was the same. We still hope. We still wait. And so the world heard only brief mentions of the Riverbend case before it vanished from headlines and screens. Through it all, one thing remained certain. In 1989, on a perfect spring afternoon, something changed the lives of 5 families forever. The picnic's laughter became part of a mystery that no one could solve. The silent van, the footprints, the torn napkin each was a piece of a puzzle that refused to fit. And as the years turned into decades, families carried a hope that never died, that one day, someone would find the truth hidden in those green fields and bring back what was lost. Even in the quiet years, the story of Riverbend Park flickered, like a candle in the night, shone for anyone who believed that time does not heal all wounds, but it can bring new chances. And somewhere, in the dust of old files and behind forgotten memories, the whisper of justice waited for its moment to rise again. The spring air in 2025 felt different at Riverbend Park. New birds sang, and fresh green leaves covered the trees. Yet the memory of that long-ago picnic still lingered. It had been 36 years since the mothers vanished. Now, a new team of FBI cold case agents arrived at the park gate with boxes of modern tools and bright hope in their eyes. They drove past the oak tree where the children once played. The grown-up survivors, now adults, named Maria, Jonathan, Elaine, Carlos, and Tina stood together. Their faces calm but eager. They had waited a lifetime for this day. The agents carried thick evidence boxes from the old sheriff's vault. Inside were the picnic blanket swatches, a single blood-stained sandwich wrapper, the torn blue napkin, and even the faded parking ticket from 1989. Everything was carefully labeled. A lead agent named Special Agent Carter greeted the survivors. He spoke with a warm voice. "We're here to look again," he said. "We have new methods to help find answers." The group nodded, feeling a mix of relief and nerves. First, the agents unwrapped the blanket pieces. They laid them on clean tables in a mobile lab set up inside a park building. A forensic scientist, Dr. Lee, gently lifted each piece with tweezers. She explained that modern DNA phenotyping could predict basic traits of an unknown person from tiny blood samples. "We may learn hair color, eye color, even ancestry," she said. The survivors watched as Dr. Lee carefully cut a small circle from the blood stain. The lab's machines whirred, shining blue lights on the sample as they processed it. While the machines worked, another agent named Ramirez studied the parking ticket. He scanned it into a tablet computer, then used a digital map program to trace the ticket's barcode. The ticket showed the time, 11:42 a.m. on May 15, 1989. Ramirez tapped his screen and zoomed in on the park's old layout. He overlaid it with today's satellite view. Lines of code traced paths and locations in seconds. "This shows us exactly where the car was parked," he said. He pointed to the map. "We can now compare that to soil samples." Carlos knelt by the carpet of fallen leaves under the oak tree. He collected small soil samples in clear tubes. Nearby, a technician measured each sample's mineral content. Another typed the data into a computer that matched the soil to areas. Across the county, after a few hours, the results came back. One tube matched soil from a remote property near an abandoned farmhouse 20 miles away. The grown children exchanged looks. They remembered how that farmhouse had once belonged to a family who moved away just months before the picnic. Meanwhile, Special Agent Carter and a digital specialist named Nguyen worked on old VHS tapes that held witness interviews from 1989. The tapes were worn and fuzzy. Nguyen used image restoration software to sharpen the recordings. It's the grainy. Footage cleared, the face of a park ranger appeared on the screen. He described seeing a person in a dark jacket standing by the trees near the picnic area. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke into the camera. Carter paused the video and pointed to the ranger's chest badge number. He took careful notes. In another room, agents re-interviewed people who remembered the picnic day. They spoke to a former park employee who now lived in a nearby town. He recalled hearing an odd engine sound before the mothers left. He described the silence after. They disappeared. His face grew serious as he admitted he had felt too afraid to check on the children at the time. He apologized softly. The survivors listened with understanding. They thanked him for coming forward again. As night fell, the mobile lab glowed under bright lamps. Dr. Lee held a printout. The DNA sample suggests a male in his late 20s in 1989. He likely had brown hair and green eyes. His ancestry traces to a region outside our state. The group leaned in. That was new. No one before had known this. Tina whispered, "This could be the person we've searched for." Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder. The agents paused to let the grown survivors rest. They offered water and snacks. Maria took a quiet moment alone by the creek's edge. She knelt and touched the water's cool edge, remembering her 10-year-old self splashing there. She thought of her mother's laughter. A soft breeze lifted strands of her hair. She closed her eyes and felt a gentle hope rising in her chest. The next morning, the agents met with local prosecutors to obtain search warrants for the farmhouse property identified by the soil analysis. The grown survivors chose to stand together outside the old building. It was covered in vines, paint peeling from its wooden walls. The windows were boarded up. Chain-link fence surrounded the yard. Agent Carter handed the warrant to the sheriffs. "Deputy." They unlocked the gate and let the survivors walk inside first. Maria stepped onto the cracked porch. She felt her pulse quicken. She remembered how the park had felt familiar and safe. Now, this place felt silent and distant. Elaine touched her arm. "We're together," she said. Carlos and Tina nodded. Jonathan straightened his shoulders. They moved toward the front door. Inside, dust-covered old furniture. Spiderwebs hung in corners. The team spread out, following carefully marked search patterns. Agents carried metal detectors and bright lights. They checked rooms for hidden items. In one corner of a back bedroom, an agent's detector beeped softly. He cleared away dust from a small wooden chest. Inside, he found a faded blue napkin, exactly like the one from the picnic, but with thicker folds. He called Agent Carter over. Carter examined the napkin with gloved hands. "This matches the fabric," he said. "It came from someone who left it here soon after the picnic." Nearby, agents found a small pile of old notebooks. One had a leather cover and yellowed pages. Inside were scribbles about the picnic day, notes on time, place, and a crude drawing of the white van. Handwriting matched the park rangers. It also included a license plate fragment, 3 letters and 2 numbers. This fragment matched the ranger's VHS interview.
Yeah.
Carter held the notebook up, voice steady. "This piece is key." Back at the mobile command post, agents entered the fragment into a license plate database. They ran searches for any plate containing those letters and numbers in the area in 1989. Within moments, the system flagged one match, a plate registered to a rental agency in the next county. The agency had long since closed, but records survived in state archives. Agents retrieved the booking log. The log showed a van rented by a man named Alan Murphy on May 10, 1989, and returned on May 20th. His address matched the abandoned farmhouse. He had disappeared soon after. Special Agent Carter gathered the grown survivors. He placed photos of Murphy on the table, a man in his late 20s, dark hair, green eyes. The group stared at the image. Carlos's voice shook. This is him. This is the person who came to the park. Tina nodded, tears in her eyes. Maria breathed slowly. We finally have a name, she said. The agent set up a plan to find Murphy. Records showed he had once had a cousin living in another state. They reached out to that cousin. The cousin, now elderly, remembered Alan's troubled past. He agreed to help, giving phone numbers and addresses for places Alan might have gone. Investigators prepared to follow these leads. Even as the case heated up, the grown survivors felt a calm excitement. For decades, they had felt powerless. Now, they held pieces of the puzzle in their hands. They understood the work would continue, but for the first time, they believed in a real resolution. Agent Carter promised to keep them informed at each step. As the sun set again on Riverbend Park, the mobile lab lights dimmed. The grown survivors stood by the oak tree, looking at the spot where they once picnicked and where their lives changed forever. Maria gathered her friends in a circle. We've walked this path too many times, she said softly. But tonight, we take a new step forward. They joined hands and watched fireflies flicker among the grass. Hope felt strong and bright, like the summer stars above. And in that quiet moment, they knew that at last, the long night of waiting was giving way to a new dawn of answers. The morning sun rose gentle and bright over Riverbend Park as the survivors and agents gathered again near the old oak tree. The air felt hopeful, as if it had waited many years for this moment. Special Agent Carter held an envelope in his hand. Inside were letters from the farmhouse search, including one from Alan Murphy himself. The letter was short, written in careful, shaky handwriting, said he was sorry, and that he would help the families find closure. He admitted that he had taken the mothers by mistake and had hidden their belongings at the farmhouse. He did not explain why, only that he regretted his actions and wanted to help set things right. Maria felt her heart swell with relief and fear all at once. She looked at Jonathan, Elaine, Carlos, and Tina. Each of them had changed since they were children, but they shared the same hopeful look in their eyes. Maria stepped forward and gently opened the envelope. She held the paper with trembling hands. The others leaned close. As she read the letter out loud, her voice shook, but each word brought the mystery one step closer to an answer. When she finished, they stood together in silence, listening to the wind rustle through the leaves. Above, the agents guided the group back to the mobile command post where Dr. Lee had already prepared a plan. She explained that Murphy had agreed to meet at a small, unused interview room nearby. He would bring information about the mother's whereabouts and any clues he still remembered. Families felt nervous, unsure of what to expect. They rode in a van behind the FBI cars, their legs restless but their minds focused on the end of a long search. Inside the interview room, Murphy sat across from Agent Carter. His hair was gray at the temples, and his eyes held deep regret. He apologized again, saying he had panicked when he saw the mothers leave the children alone. He said he meant only to protect the children, not to harm anyone. He admitted he had hidden their purses, notes, and a few clothing items at the farmhouse, thinking someone would find them there. He confessed he then ran away, afraid of facing what he had done. His voice was soft, and at times he paused, struggling with his guilt. The families listened, their emotions tangled. Carlos felt anger and sorrow rise in his chest. But Maria placed a hand on his arm and reminded everyone they had come to find truth, not to judge. After Murphy finished, he led the agents and families to the old well at the back of the farmhouse yard. Said he had dropped the mothers' purses into the well, thinking they would stay safe there. He guided them to a spot where moss still clung to the stones. A Special Agent Carter shone a light down the well. The beam revealed old fabric and a strap of a small handbag. The agents lowered a rope basket to collect the items. One by one, they pulled up Mrs. Thompson's blue silk scarf, Mrs. Patel's leather purse, and a half-empty bottle of lipstick. The families held back tears as they saw these pieces of their mother's lives. Each item felt precious after all those years. Murphy then led them to a shallow grave beside the well. He pointed to a wooden cross marker that he had placed long ago. The ground was soft there, and a single stone lay at its edge. Murphy's voice cracked as he said, "I'm so sorry." The agents called the local medical examiner to the scene. Although the families braced themselves, no one expected what came next. Two small coffins were gently removed from the grave. Inside were the remains of Mrs. Thompson and Mrs. Patel. The examiner said they had been there nearly intact, preserved by the cool earth. The final account would take days, but he was certain these were the missing mothers. Maria closed her eyes, tears spilling freely. Jonathan wrapped an arm around her. Elaine knelt beside the examiner and touched the coffin's wood. Carlos and Tina stood close, each holding a single white flower, as they had every year at the park entrance. The adults beside them helped guide the scene with quiet respect. The world felt still and heavy, yet oddly light, as if a weight had finally lifted. That afternoon, the FBI arranged a small memorial service by the creek's edge. Friends, neighbors, and even people who had only heard the story gathered to honor the two mothers and the 5 children. A local minister spoke softly of hope after suffering and the power of truth. Each family lit a candle, placing it on a low wooden table beside photos of the lost picnic day. The gentle click of matchsticks echoed in the air. The candle's flames danced, reflecting in the children's adult eyes. When the service ended, the families walked together to the picnic spot. The old blankets were gone, but the oak tree still stood tall. A wooden bench now sat beneath its branches, placed there by the park to honor the lost mothers. Maria, Jonathan, Elaine, Carlos, and Tina each laid a single white flower by the bench. They touched the oak's rough bark and whispered their goodbyes. Maria closed her eyes and said, "Thank you for waiting for us." In the days that followed, the FBI presented a full report to the district attorney. Charges of negligent concealment and unlawful burial were filed against Alan Murphy. The case went to court later that year. The families attended every hearing, sitting together in the front row. They did not expect vengeance. They sought acknowledgement and responsibility. Murphy pleaded guilty and received a sentence that allowed him to spend his remaining years helping at shelters and in community service, guided by a judge who recognized his remorse and the family's need for closure. As winter turned to spring, the Texas legislature passed a new law requiring regular re-examination of cold case files every 10 years. The law also provided funding for modern forensic tools and training. Special Agent Carter and his team testified about the Riverbend case, showing how small details and new science had brought answers after decades. Lawmakers nodded, promising to honor the memory of lost loved ones by never letting their cases fade away. Back at Riverbend Park, the oak tree bench became a gathering place each May 15th. Families new and old would come to lay flowers, read names, and share stories. Teachers brought students to learn about the importance of speaking up and caring for each other. Park volunteers held annual picnics in memory of the two mothers, inviting anyone who came to join in the tradition. Laughter once again echoed through the grass, carried gently by the breeze. The 5 survivors found strength in each other. Maria wrote a book about the journey from loss to hope, written in simple words that children could understand. Started a foundation for safe play spaces, raising funds to keep parks bright and supervised. Elaine became a counselor, helping families cope with long-term grief. Carlos trained rescue dogs for search missions, each dog named after one of the 5 missing children. Tina opened an art gallery featuring paintings of oak trees, picnic blankets, and hearts of light. Years later, when children sat under the oak tree to eat sandwiches and watch the creek, they would see a small plaque set into the bench. It read, "In memory of Dorothy Thompson and Anila Patel, may play always be safe, and may love bring answers." A gentle reminder that even the darkest mysteries can be solved when people choose to search for truth and care for each other. And so the story of that Texas picnic in 1989 came full circle. 5 children had vanished, 2 mothers had been lost, and a long night of waiting had begun. Yet in 2025, a new dawn of discovery changed everything. The families found healing, the town found purpose, and the world learned that time, science, and compassion can join to bring light after the deepest shadows. The oak tree stood witness to it all, its branches reaching skyward, as if to say that hope once planted, will grow strong roots and spread wide across generations.